Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Luana Rose from luanarose.com, nervous system specialist, and here on my channel talking about all things nervous system, relationship health, and healing trauma. Today's video is all about my story of healing from complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll start by saying this video is heavy. I reflect and share with you some traumatic and difficult experiences I went through early on in life that ended up with a very dysregulated nervous system and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and how I healed through those symptoms, and I no longer suffer from any CPTSD symptoms. The intent of this video is to offer hope, a light at the end of the tunnel, and inspiration, because I keep getting these emails over the past 3 or 4 weeks of people asking me, hey, I want to know about your story. I'm in the thick of going through healing those old somatic memories in my body, and I'm having these weird symptoms come up, and I need to relate to someone that's been through this and kind of come out on the other side. So thank you for you if you've written me recently. I appreciate your encouragement and inspiration to share my story. I'm going to dive into some specific events that happened, share my reflections about my journey, and at the end I'll offer some tools that may be useful for you if you are also on your healing journey. Our healing journey is an ever unfolding process. We are never completely done. It's kind of like a flower, petals unfolding. There's layers. It happens in its own time. We need to go slow. And it's a process. So it's not about getting it perfect. It's not about standing at the peak of that mountain and saying, I did it, I'm done, I'm out. Nope, because there's another valley right on the other side, and then another peak and another valley. So I hope this story sharing time inspires you in some way. The start of my story, I want to start with the most significant traumas to set the stage for the variations of how complex post-traumatic stress disorder can be developed. So when I was a baby, right at birth, my birth mom gave birth to me, and I was adopted. So my birth mom chose my parents, and she gave birth, and I had to stay in the hospital. Those were the rules back then. This was almost 30 years ago. I had to stay in the hospital in an incubator, and I was alone for the first 10 days of my life. So that was a hugely significant trauma that happened at such a young age, when my little being didn't really make sense of the loss that was experienced. Then it was a somatic loss, right? Because cognitively I didn't think of, oh, mom's not here. The person I was, ride or die in the womb with for the last 9 months, and we were listening to music and chatting together, she wasn't there anymore. So a baby feels that only on a cellular level of fear and tragic grief, really. So that was the first, and I would say most significant trauma that I experienced, not really because anyone was doing something bad to me, or I don't really think of it as a victim thing. I think of it as a blessing. I have an open adoption, so I know my birth mom, we're very close, and my birth dad, I also know him, and of course my parents. So I view it as a blessing, and I think a lot of people view adoption that way. Wow, there's emotion still coming up. And at the same time, that rupture of attachment, that initial attachment rupture, is significant. And it's like a house, right? When we build a house, we have a platform, we dig a hole in the earth, right? And we have a platform to make sure that structure, that initial structure, is deep and can hold the rest of life. So why I say it's the most significant is because it happened so young. I was 0 days old to 10 days, right? And then all the other things that happen in life were sitting on top of that weak structure of the house. So that's why it was so significant, because my initial structure of my being and sense of belonging and safety in the world was faulty, essentially. So the next thing that I can think of that was significant in terms of my complex post-traumatic symptoms and them developing was bullying. I got bullied quite a bit consistently at school for my looks, I was a chubby kid, and yeah, I didn't really feel safe enough to talk to anyone. I think I did a little bit talk to, I think, my parents and maybe my sister at the time. But bullying was a pretty consistent thing that happened, which leads into the next one. I was the only child, the only brown, blackish child and human in my family, in my close family unit, as well as in my town. So I grew up in a town of like around 6,000 people, and amazing people, you know. However, I was an anomaly in terms of my race and how I looked. So it kind of links to the bullying, because I was bullied for, you know, being different, looking different, having different hair. I remember that was a big thing probably till I was 7, of tying my hair back because everyone wanted to touch my hair. And it sounds cute, but as a little child learning boundaries and sense of identity, it's a threat, right? It's a perceived threat from peers, essentially. So these are all the layers on top of the faulty foundation. And I'm kind of laughing now because it's, I've worked through a lot of this stuff, and yeah, it's just created space for compassion and for that little girl part of me that I still very much resonate with. I remember the first time I could put words together. My mom always tells me this. The first time you could say words, Luana, you asked your dad, why is your skin color different than everyone else in the family? And I think my dad had like a really sweet answer. And so that kind of plays off of identity, like not resonating with my peers, the people that did show me unconditional love. In some way, there was like this confusion that happened of when I looked in the mirror, I saw one thing. When I looked at them, they didn't look exactly like me. So there's kind of confusion in attunement there, as well as like I'm even reflecting on this in the past few weeks of attunement with other people, of looking, when we attune, we look at one another's face, and there's this resonance, there's this, or there ought to be, with proper attunement, there's this openness and kind of relational dynamic that happens. I think for me, growing up in quite a Caucasian community, a lot of folks, not with bad intention, but just with, oh, you look different. So there's the facial expressions are like, oh, it's different. And I actually only noticed this recently because I've been back visiting for a few weeks now, and I'm like, that's so fascinating, because it still happens, but now I have the education behind, oh wow, that must have really affected me as a child. now it kind of plays to my strengths. But that's part of the misattunement that I felt within, and kind of, I think, had an effect on my nervous system. The other significant thing that happened, I was 5 years old and I was sexually abused by a family member, extended family member. And at that time, at the age of 5, right, our peers and family is our safety net and our home and belonging. So that was a significant rupture in my personal power as a 5-year-old, as well as my trust and safety within my body. After that, I felt like I couldn't even hug people without it feeling kind of off, or like fear coming up. And I also remember that's when, after reflecting, of course, as an adult, that's when I started gaining weight. So I was a chubby kid after that, between 5 and when I hit puberty. So that's another significant thing that happened. And the next one, which is a little bit lighter, but was kind of the cherry on top to my CPTSD symptoms that I used to experience, was mountain biking. When I was 14 years old, I believe, I used to dance a lot, ballet, jazz, hip hop, all the things, to downhill mountain biking. And I love to go fast, and I love to like train, and I was the fastest young lady in the valley for a few years. And with that, of course, comes with high impact crashes, because downhill mountain biking, it's a risky, high adrenaline sport. So yeah, that, if we look at the kind of weak foundation as being adopted and having that early rupture, and then those other crappy things that happened, and then the cherry on top of having multiple concussions. I don't think I ever broke anything, but I had some pretty severe crashes. One where I had to walk with a cane for 3 months. So that on top basically created this havoc in my nervous system, this internal threat that I always felt, and my system was stuck in a survival physiology due to those experiences in life. And I will say that the most significant one personally was the first one, being adopted at such a young age and staying isolated in a incubator due to that. Those were the regulations of the government at the time. If birth mom wanted to come back and relinquish her baby, that was like a 10-day grace period. I hope they've changed their ways now, but having that as a foundation, a baby at that time in those circumstances, yes, mom and nurses came in to have some hands-on contact with me as much as they could, and a baby under threat, meaning no big human to co-regulate and to know, hey, baby's safe, someone in the world loves me. The baby will, which I did, go into a freeze physiology, right? The baby can't, if we think of a stress response, the baby can't run to find mom. The baby can't fight, say, hey, this isn't right, I'm not supposed to be in an incubator all alone. So the next thing after fight, fleeing, right, is freeze. So my physiology went into this, we call it deep dorsal freeze response, which later on in life created health issues, right? And through, which I'll get to, my journey with healing, I've come out of that freeze slowly but surely. I do recall I do recall my mom saying, "Hey, you were such a good baby. We brought you home, like you were a little angel." I'm sure all moms say this. And she said, "You never cried." And through this work, now of course, we know or I know that my physiology was in that freeze response for, since day one, basically. So of course I'm not going to cry because I was in terror and shock. So I lived a very highly functioning freeze physiology through, I'm almost 30, through basically 20 years of my life. And I had a great wake-up call from a practitioner who's also a friend, and she was like, yeah, if you don't heal your nervous system physiology, then at age 20, you're going to have problems when you get to 30, because that's kind of how this works. Eventually, there's going to be symptoms, psychological, physiological symptoms that happen if our nervous system is so dysregulated, like mine was. I want you to know my most significant part of healing. I'm going to tell you this first before I get into seeing practitioners and how that kind of played out in my life, because I think this is really important and it goes right alongside with getting professional help. And this was my personal life. I lived in a city. I lived in Vancouver, Canada, for a significant amount of time, and I was fortunate enough to attract roommates and friends that were kind of my support system. And support system, I mean, we could co-regulate together. I felt like I belonged somewhere. Some of them were doing their own healing journey, and some of them were just living life, right? But we all lived in a house together, and I felt safe. I felt safe enough to feel like myself at home, to kind of put my guard down, which I didn't get growing up, to get to know people in a way that was fruitful for me, like I could be seen, because that was an issue growing up. It was scary to be seen because of my differences from the rest of the people, my hair, the texture of my hair, and my skin color. So being seen was something that I had to feel more okay with and build my safety capacity in my body to be seen. So living with, I think at one point, 6 roommates, constantly, right? We all had our own rooms in this huge house, and just interacting in that little community really helped me come home to myself and learn how to be in relationship, right? Platonic relationship with others, and also be able to have that kind of interdependence, that I'm my own person. I can also be with you and be, doing my own thing in a harmonious living environment. So that was a hugely significant time in my healing journey in my 20s. And from the work that I do now in helping other people heal from CPTSD, it's hard to feel like ourselves or be recharged around other people with histories of such qualities, with, histories of trauma and hard experiences. So if you're watching this, consider spending time. It doesn't have to be living with 6 other people. It can be going to your favorite coffee shop and just chatting with the barista and having that small social engagement every day. Or if you have a dog, taking your dog for a walk and chatting with other people along the trail or at the dog park. Because that social engagement part, I know for me, was really challenging, because I would feel like I would lose myself, and also I it was exhausting. It was exhausting to be around other people. And how I did that was living with others for a while, and I also worked in the service industry for a long time, so in restaurants, right? So kind of buzzing around to different tables, taking orders, giving checks and schmoozing was the perfect kind of mix for me, because I learned how to be present in my body and also interact with others and not feel that social anxiety and fear that was so well known to me for a long time. Moving on, what I had to do to grow and heal. What did I have to do? Well, I had to make some big lifestyle changes. By the time I was around the age of 20 years old, when I initially got diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, I was self-medicating with painkillers and marijuana at the time, because I grew up in a kind of all-natural environment, and I refused to take any over-the-counter stuff for my pain. I was experiencing chronic pain in my whole body, specifically my back. At one point, I was considering spinal surgery because of a slipped disc that was really sticky and just wouldn't heal. So this was at 21 years old, which is wild. But yeah, I was considering spinal surgery, and thank goodness that doctor was, and the neurosurgeon were kind of pushing me away from that door, and it led me to the first lifestyle change that I had to do. That was filter out the noise and trust my gut. So I tried all the normal things for healing physical pain, physiotherapy, chiropractor, IMS. I think that was mostly what I tried. Pilates, yoga, meditation, and it all helped a little bit, but it was kind of like a Band-Aid thing. After a few days, after a few weeks, the pain would be back, and I couldn't live my life how I wanted to live it. So eventually I got connected with this somatic experiencing practitioner, and after the first session, I was like, wow, there were no needles, there was no exercises that I had to do, and I feel amazing, and my back pain went away. And I was like, okay, I need to pursue this because I don't quite understand it yet, but something's different. And I've always been someone that I don't want to be dependent on anything, like dependent on coffee, or at the time when I was self-medicating, marijuana, or, a Pilates studio in order to feel the way I wanted to feel. Those things are all serve their purpose. But this modality of healing, somatic experiencing, I just had to show up, just me, that's it. No yoga pants, nothing. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So fast forward a few years, I got trained in somatic experiencing, and then I went on to study with Kain and Terrell, who specialize in developmental trauma, which is trauma that happens in the first 3 years of life, or most specifically, surgeries, in utero trauma, emotional kind of traumas that happen in the first 3 years of life. What else did I have to do to change? I stayed committed to my process. Once I found modalities of healing that were specific for developmental trauma and worked, I was feeling results in my body, then I stayed committed to the process. I put all my eggs in one basket, and I stayed determined even through the weeks and the days that were hard and that I wanted to give up hope, and my physical symptoms sometimes got worse before they got better, which is a normal part of this healing work. Sometimes I would shake for weeks and weeks and feel this fear. But the great thing about doing work with these modalities is that the fear that is felt, we gain this capacity, this greater capacity to just be with it and not have it be overwhelming. So that was a huge saving grace for me, because at times I had to pull hope out of the sky. I just have this like relentless hope and faith that I'm on the right path. I'm choosing to take one step in front of the other, and I'm moving forward. Sometimes I take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. That's the nature of healing developmental trauma. But I'm taking those 2 steps forward, and that 1 step back is never to the place where I was initially, because it's really not easy breezy. It's challenging work, and not everyone will do it, but it has beautiful, beautiful rewards. And, one of those is being symptom-free. I don't suffer from complex post-traumatic stress disorder at all anymore. I remember a time in my healing where it shifted from me being afraid to go to sleep because I would wake up in night terrors and sweat and shock. And, I was seeing a practitioner at the time, and then a few weeks went by after working through some really hard stuff. And I remember my sleep patterns changed to I absolutely loved to sleep then. It was the best part of my day because my system had to catch up. I was like bankrupt on sleep because I wasn't sleeping because I was afraid of it. So those shifts are landmarks of the neuroplasticity and the probability that if you stay committed, if you stay determined and loving to yourself, then you will get through those hard parts. You will get through those valleys. You'll climb right up the mountain again and have a beautiful view. At the beginning of this video, I said I would offer you some quick tools or words to help you and inspire you if you're in the thick of healing somatic memories and past traumas or nervous system dysregulation. So I have a little list here of what you need to know to do it yourself. Commitment, determination, and time, especially if your adverse experiences happen young, such as my own, first 10 days of life. It takes time. It takes sometimes years. And we need to accept it, and we need to stay the course and stay committed and determined. It can't be done alone. It really can't. We need an animal. We need family, friends, even if it's just one person that is there for you, that texts you back, that, says you're important to them. And we need to know that healing is possible. I think there's this kind of phenomenon going on out there that mental and physical illness, such as CPTSD, is a life sentence. It's not a life sentence. We have this thing called neuroplasticity where our brain and body have the power and capability to change itself. If we can change one way to developing symptoms to complex post-traumatic stress disorder, we can flip the script. It's a continuum. That's what neuroplasticity is all about. With the right support and dedication, you can heal from physical and mental illness, such as complex post-traumatic stress disorder. A few books that I will link up below that are my favorite books that really kind of resonate with me, that knowledge is powerless until you take that knowledge and turn it into action. So a few books that I really enjoy: Scared Sick, Nurturing Resilience, and The Body Keeps the Score. And turning that knowledge into action, I recommend finding yourself a practitioner that is trained to help people heal developmental trauma. So that has trained with Terrell, Kain. Those are my people of choice. Kain, Terrell, and somatic experiencing practitioners can also be helpful, but somatic experiencing is for shock trauma more so rather than developmental, so that's really important to know. because just because somatic experiencing is more widely known, it doesn't mean the scope of wonderful tools and capacity there is for healing developmental stuff, which for my experience, my CPTSD symptoms were from that faulty foundation, the developmental disruption and trauma. So I hope this video was helpful to you in some way. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, you are committed. You've watched all the way through, and that means that you can stay the course, you can stay persistent and heal yourself and heal your life. So thank you so much for being here, listening to my journey. Comment below if some part of this resonated with you, and make sure you're subscribed for more videos like this, and I will see you very, very soon. Take good care.